Hong Kong is one of the most important economies in all of Asia. This is because of their role in international trade. For decades, it has served as a global shipping and financial hub, connecting East and West. Its deep water port is one of the busiest in the world, and its economy is built on free trade, low taxes, and open markets. To show you just how important Hong Kong is to the world, we can graph out the total exports of Hong Kong. Here on the graph, you can see that Hong Kong, as of 2023, exported over $573 billion. That's no small figure, and it is also worth noting that in the previous years, such as in 2021, Hong Kong once exported over $669 billion. Comparatively, if we look at just how much Hong Kong exports, we get to see that they are indeed one of the world's biggest. Here on the graph, you can see that they have more merchandise exports than the United Kingdom, Singapore, India, and nearly every single economy out there, except for a select few. This enormous trade has been a key part of Hong Kong's overall economic success. Without it, the city would not have become the financial powerhouse it is today. Trade supports jobs, drives business for banks and logistics companies, and keeps the city closely connected to both regional and global markets. Unfortunately, ever since Donald Trump entered into his second tenure as the President of the United States, he has increased tariffs on China by as much as 145% on Chinese imports. This sharp escalation in trade barriers has intensified the US-China trade war, with China retaliating by imposing tariffs of up to 125% on American goods. And you'd probably think that this trade war between China and the United States isn't going to directly impact Hong Kong, right? After all, while they are part of China, they operate under a one country, two systems framework. This means Hong Kong has its own economic and trade policies separate from Beijing's. In fact, for many years, the US treated Hong Kong differently from the mainland. So, would Hong Kong actually feel the impact of this trade war? The answer is yes. How so? Well, there lies what is called the re-export business. The re-export business is basically when goods made in one country, like China, are shipped to another place, in this case, Hong Kong, before being exported again to a third destination, such as the United States. These goods don't get changed or processed much in Hong Kong. They just pass through. But the city still earns money by handling the logistics, warehousing, shipping services, customs clearance, and financing for these transactions. Just how much does Hong Kong benefit from this re-export business, you ask? Well, they benefit massively. Here's a table on Hong Kong's trade, data from the Census and Statistics Department. Here, you can clearly see just how reliant Hong Kong is on trade. You can clearly see that in 2024, Hong Kong had total exports of over $582 billion, and shockingly, over $574 billion of which are actually re-exports. Only $7.4 billion of Hong Kong's total exports were domestic exports. This simply means that over 98% of Hong Kong's export economy depends on goods that are not even made in Hong Kong. This has not only occurred recently, but historically. Here's another graph on how dependent Hong Kong is on their re-export business. Here, you can see the re-export earnings didn't contribute in low digits. They were basically the reason for Hong Kong's economic success. From 1990 to 2001, for instance, re-export earnings contribution to GDP growth was a massive 68.6%, while at the same time, domestic exports were negative. And a majority of these re-export business comes from no other than China itself. Hong Kong, after all, is well known to be the gateway between China and the rest of the world. So, in other words, this emerging trade war between China and the United States is indeed going to impact Hong Kong's economy significantly. But what's even worse is that Trump actually paused his tariffs on other countries. On April 9, 2025, President Donald Trump issued an executive order implementing a 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs for most countries, reducing them to a uniform 10% rate. However, this pause did not apply to China, which faced increased tariffs of up to 145% on its exports to the US. This means that while some nations would see rates fall back to a baseline of 10% for the interim period, goods from China, and by extension Hong Kong, would continue to be subject to punitive rates, which, when combined with existing tariffs, can reach cumulative levels far exceeding typical trade policy norms. Another crucial aspect of the tariff policy is the targeted elimination of the de minimis exemption. Traditionally, low-value shipments, those under $800, could enter the United States duty-free under this rule, a provision that has long benefited Chinese e-commerce giants and, by extension, Hong Kong's re-export businesses. With this exemption terminated specifically for goods from China and Hong Kong effective May 2, 2025, even small parcels will now incur significant duties. This effectively raises the cost for companies relying on low-cost postal channels, potentially disrupting supply chains and increasing consumer prices. The new rate is 90% of the package's value, or a flat $75 per item, whichever is higher. This replaces the previous rate of 30%, or $25 per item. So, just how much impact are we talking about here? Well, since we are still at the beginning of these all, we can look at various key datasets. One example is no other than the stock market. If we graph out the stock market of Hong Kong, also known as the Hang Seng Index, which includes major companies like HSBC, Tencent, AIA, and China Mobile, we can clearly see a trend. In early 2025, following Trump's Liberation Day on April 2nd, the Hang Seng Index dropped the days following it. This drop showcases a clear loss of investor confidence in Hong Kong's economic stability. Another economic impact that we can see may be from Trump's first trade war in China starting in 2018. If we graph out the total exports of Hong Kong to the United States, we get to see a clear drop. Here, you can see that in the year 2018, Hong Kong exported over $37 billion to the United States. The trade war under Trump started on July 9th of that year. Hence, from 2019 to 2021, you can see that their exports haven't grown since the trade war started. In fact, by 2024, after challenges occurred between China and the United States, exports had continued to go down to just $27 billion. On top of this direct export decrease, it is also important to know that Hong Kong is home to more than 1,000 US companies. Here's a graph on the direct investment abroad of the United States to Hong Kong. Here, in this data, you can easily see just how much investments flow from the United States to Hong Kong. They are at over $90.5 billion for the year 2023. If we compare that to the entire Asia and Pacific region, which has a direct investment position from the United States of over $1.07 trillion, meaning that their investments into Hong Kong alone is over 8.4% of the entire US investment portfolio in the Asia-Pacific region. That's a significant share, especially for a single city. So, the problem that this trade war would bring to Hong Kong is indeed going to be devastating. As a matter of fact, data from the Census and Statistics Department even shows that 14% of the parent companies operating in Hong Kong come from the United States. That's nearly 1 in every 7 foreign companies in the city. There are, in other words, thousands of workers relying on US firms in Hong Kong, billions of dollars worth of value and services tied directly to the continued operation of these American businesses. If these firms begin to scale down, relocate, or close their Hong Kong operations due to geopolitical uncertainty or trade restrictions, the ripple effects across the city would be massive. Now, before we end the video, let's talk about what Hong Kong is doing to help mitigate these impacts. One of the biggest feats they are doing is that they are tackling other opportunities beyond the United States. Chief Executive John Lee had vowed to fully seize for Hong Kong the opportunities in China's growth and also deepen the city's ties with countries in the Middle East and Southeast Asia. This would be done by strengthening international exchanges and deepening regional ties, including by signing more free trade agreements with countries and regions. Despite these actions, however, Hong Kong is still deeply intertwined with the American economy, and it may take a longer amount of time for them to actually mitigate the potential risks. But anyway, do let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.